Do not adjust your podcast playing device. This is the Texas Tribune TribCast, and I am Matthew Watkins, and you just heard some new theme music for the TribCast. A nice new jam by our producers, Rob and Chris. What do you think, Eleanor?
I love it. New year, new music, new us.
That's right. Yeah. That voice you heard, of course, is Eleanor Klibanoff, law and politics reporter for the Tribune.
Still, same me.
Still, same Eleanor. Any New Year's resolutions?
Do more TribCast. Have more fun with the TribCast. We're gonna get weird on the TribCast this year.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Stick around. The new theme music, new us.
Yeah.
This week we are joined by two politics reporters, Kayla Guo. Hello, Kayla.
Hi, Matthew.
How was your holiday break?
Very long and nice.
Excellent.
Yeah.
And Alejandro Serrano.
Howdy.
How are you doing?
I'm all right.
Good. All right. Well, speaking of trying new things on the podcast, we are going to do a start of the year podcast, 10 burning questions for Texas politics in 2026. We have compiled the Crack Politics team, and I have compiled a list of questions from them. It goes a little bit beyond who's going to win and all that kind of stuff, but I think the things that are going to define Texas politics for the next 10 years, we're going to collect y'all's thoughts, get your ideas, and see how this goes. Are y'all ready?
For the next 10 years?
Did I say 10 years?
10 items for the next year.
10 items for the next 10 years. But the impact could
the
be felt
repercussions will be a decade.
As long as 10 years. Yes. Okay, are y'all ready?
Yes.
All right. Question number 1 from the GOP politics group. Does the Greg Abbott of 2024 stick around in 2026? And what I mean by that is, as you all remember, in 2024, we saw the new powerful Greg Abbott ousting 8 House members, really becoming the dominant political figure, not just for his ability to win elections himself, but to affect the political futures of people across the state. What do we think about Greg Abbott coming into 2026, the next election season and primary season going forward?
Everyone looks at me. All right. I would ask, I don't know if it's Governor Greg Abbott of 2024 as much as I think the environment has changed. And I think back to like 2017 when he had $40-50 million and first stepped into primaries. Everyone was like, whoa, what is the governor doing? So I think this is a new strategy. I mean, he has like unmatched fundraising ability, and I think unmatched desire in a lot of ways, determination. And I think we're going to keep seeing more of what we've seen. I'm reminded of this summer during the redistricting battle, where he was on a radio talk show and he said, this is unprecedented. And what I'm paraphrasing here, but what Democrats are used to is no more. Like, we are going to use every tool we have. And I think that's what we're going to keep seeing.
And I think we see that I think he's already said and telegraphed that he plans to put a lot of resources into flipping Harris County red. He's recruited candidates. I think the Houston Chronicle reported this, to run in every race on the ballot in Harris County, including in pretty blue seats. I think like June Wu's seat, he's recruited somebody to run against them. They might seem a little bit pie in the sky aspirations, but I think he's going to focus his money and attention to doing what he can there.
I feel like the difference between 2026 and 2024 is he had that issue to fight for in 2024. And what really changed was it was a fight that was within the party, right? He picked a side. He threw his considerable resources toward that. He's kind of talking about that same way. I think he probably, I don't know why he wouldn't, enjoyed the idea of like, I am now the king, you have to bow down to me, at least in the Republican Party in that realm. He's talked about spending $25 million in 26. He has talked about property taxes and the possibility of eliminating property taxes. But property taxes are not a complicated, controversial topic within the Republican Party. And so I do wonder, you talk about the circumstances being different, is like, does he have that wedge? Does he have that thing that he can do to sort of assert his will? Or maybe the difference is just they're already all on his side in this case.
And I think there is a difference between, I want to oust these specific House members who opposed vouchers, who are Republicans, with more conservative Republicans, or more conservative on vouchers at least, than, I'm going to turn a traditionally blue county red. Like, I think he probably will have some successes there, whether it's with judges or things like that. But, we may actually see sort of what are the limits of a Republican governor's or Republican political kingmaker's power in blue, deeply blue urban areas in Texas. Like, it's easy, I think, being in Austin or being in the capital to feel like there are no limits to what Republicans can do. And then you get out into like the blue urban areas and it's like, well, there are pretty significant limits to what you can do.
One thing that I think is interesting, though, is that it's not just property Texas or Harris County. I mean, it's also South Texas. It feels like he has like all these issues and he has a lot of money to pour into them. And one thing that's also curious and very fascinating about the governor is that he doesn't have a legislative background. He was a jurist, and the way he governs is very different. Like we see that with emergency declarations, disaster declarations, vetoes. I mean, I'm sure we'll get into THC later. So I don't know. I'm curious.
I do think like the biggest test of his power, particularly within the Republican Party, will perhaps be the comptroller's race. Everyone knows the background here. He appointed Kelly Hancock as the acting comptroller. He immediately endorsed him. That did not stop two other, fairly well-known in Texas politics candidates from getting in the race. Don Huffines, who had previously run against him as governor, a very conservative person, someone who I think could possibly be perceived as a bit of a headache for Abbott were he to be elected into office. Christy Craddock, someone who has in the past been talked about as a possible future governor of Texas, a railroad commissioner, daughter of the former House Speaker. He clearly wants Hancock to win. How much is he willing to really fight for him? And how much will it mean to the primary voters that Hancock has Abbott fighting for him? I think will be a really interesting test. That's a little bit different than the voucher test because it's not necessarily pitting the activist wing of the party against the moderate wing of the party, with Abbott taking the activist wing side.
Right. Sorry, and I know you're covering the comptrollers, right? But if anything, it's taking sort of the, opposing the activists, right? I mean, Kelly Hancock was a vote against Ken Paxton in the impeachment. That's sort of, I feel like we've not heard as much about that as I sort of expected to yet, but it is sort of an issue. I mean, Alejandro.
Yeah, I mean, I think we will get a glimpse of an answer, not a definitive answer, but next week when the next campaign finance filings are submitted to the state, and we'll see like how much are the candidates hauling, how much are people spending, and how much is sort of like the governor's apparatus trying to help Hancock. Because the other two candidates are prolific fundraisers. I mean, Chris Craddock is Mr. Huffines has self-funding his campaign and spent a lot to try to unseat the governor.
Yeah. So this leads to my next question, which is, in the 10 years that I have worked at the Tribune, coming up on 11 years actually, the story of Republican politics in the state has been the establishment versus the insurgent wing. Every election, we sort of look at the results to see how did each side fare. And the question I have is, what is the establishment in 2026? Is there an establishment in 2026? And if so, who represents the establishment?
I mean, this is, I think, also a question that in some ways is like roiling national Republican politics as well. I mean, just like the sort of outsider, we're not the swamp, we're not part of, we're the outsider voices are now have so much power and are so central, I think, in some ways to the party apparatus that they have become the establishment in some ways, which makes it hard for them. Sort of, they're in a tricky position to try to be governing as outsiders and truth tellers when it's like, well, you guys just have, if not a majority, like a really powerful part of the party. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, when you think about where the Republican Party is going, who is now the activist wing and who is the establishment wing?
Or is that even how we should
is
be
that
framing
even like
this
a relevant
anymore?
framing, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's hard to see where that distinction even lies anymore. Looking back at the legislative session, I mean, I think the activist wing got a lot of what they wanted. They got to carry a lot of big priorities through that Texas House, which I think normally we might see as a place where people might, stand up to that wing of the party. And it seems like people are in the Republican Party are very much in line, and they're very much behind Trump, behind Abbott as he's wielding this power. So yeah, I don't know that I don't see that much of a distinction.
I mean, it feels to me like there has always been it has been an relatively effective strategy, particularly in legislative races and other places, to pin an incumbent or an opponent really as a rhino, right? And as the Republican power structure has moved to the right from, say, the days of Joe Strauss to the days of Dustin Burrows, how can that rhino label continue to work? Is that something you can just kind of keep doing over and over again, or has eventually, the people who are holding power and holding influence in the legislature, have they moved enough to the right to keep the what used to be called the insurgent wing of the party happy? I mean, I think that'll be an interesting thing to watch in some of these races.
And I think we saw a little bit of that, in the speaker's race that started 2025, where it was almost laughable. And I think we all talked probably to members and Republicans who felt like, yeah, it's a little bit foolish to be saying Dustin Burrows, this lefty, rhino can you believe we're going to put him in charge of the party? It's that's almost laughable. It still was pretty effective, not effective enough to win him, or to cost him the speakership. But I don't know that anyone's going to be retiring that as a way to describe someone. It just maybe will become less and less connected to reality.
And I think the issue maybe we might see that come up on is property taxes, and maybe this push from the real right wing of, got to get rid of them entirely, and the reality just being that's really hard to do, and what is the actual proposal to do that? So I could see it being wielded as, a cudgel in that way of insurgent, true activists versus the establishment. But I think that will run into the real policy realities of how to go about doing that.
I think it's also going to be curious to see the role immigration plays in a lot of these races, and especially with illegal border crossings so low. I mean, last primary, I remember races that were dominated with messaging about border security, but they're really about vouchers. Whereas now with crossing so low and immigration enforcement so increased, I wonder what role that's going to play, and if it has an impact, if that's going to lead to changes, next cycle.
And I think you can say that about a lot of issues with President Trump in office now. It's a lot of the big things that Republicans were Texas needs to be the leader on this, the federal government isn't taking control of this, are sort of, at least temporarily, kind of non-issues. I think about a lot of the social issues. President Trump has taken, very decisive action. And now you're sort of well, what is there to rail about?
All right. Speaking of issues, last question in the GOP primary category, which is, will Ken Paxton's personal issues matter to GOP primary voters?
No, thank you.
They haven't yet.
Next. No,
all right. They have not so far. It is a different. Here's the case for it. I don't necessarily believe this case, but I'm going to build the straw man so you can mow it over, which is basically the Attorney General's race. While it matters very much to us, particularly Eleanor.
Come on. I don't like where this is going.
There are a lot of people who don't even know who the Attorney General of Texas is.
Not after I cover this race. Buckle up.
Many people know who their U.S. senators are. Much more money gets pumped into those races. And Ken Paxton is no longer the incumbent. And that might cause for a different type of evaluation of him in this 3-person race where you have, whether he's the establishment anymore or not, the person painted as the establishment candidate, John Cornyn, and you have another person trying to take up the MAGA mantle, trying to take up the anti-establishment mantle, who does not have the baggage that Ken Paxton does. So you have a new office, and you also have a different set of choices for voters. Does that change the equation at all? The answer is no, and we'll move on.
No, I mean, I think ultimately no. I don't know that is. Let me say this: are there GOP primary voters who absolutely care about this, and maybe even like Ken Paxton's, style and politics, but are not going to vote for him because of his issues? Yes. is that enough to sway the election? It might be enough to force a runoff, like, more people swinging towards Wesley Hunt or, I'm skeptical that it is enough in the end to cost him the election.
I agree.
Okay. It's funny how we talk about Paxton like as the incumbent in this race,
I know,
even though
right,
he is
yes.
not in
like,
fact
like
the
it's his
incumbent of
race
this
to
race.
lose, and
Right.
it's like,
Well, I'd
Right.
say the other thing is also like he has obviously had all this legal baggage and he has emerged, victorious. Charges have been dropped. He hasn't been impeached, and I think that helps him paint himself as a fighter who's maligned by the establishment in the way of Donald Trump, who is, of course, still very popular with primary voters. So I don't know. I think for some people it'll help him.
a complete hypothetical. Would John Cornyn be helped if he had more issues and was being maligned by the Democratic establishment?
He should have gotten, the Biden Justice Department to indict him or something. That would have
His
been
kingdom for an indictment.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Okay, let's move on to the Democrats now. Democrats, should they play nice or sharpen their knives? This is particularly a Tallarico versus Crockett framing, right? Tallarico, every grandma's favorite candidate, the sweet, nice young man who used to be a teacher. Crockett, who has become famous for her willingness to very strongly go after Republican leaders. We could frame this question either way. Should they play nice with each other in order to ensure a strengthened candidate moving forward? Or should they take the more conciliatory approach toward maybe moderate voters in order to be in a stronger position? Where do we think the mind is of the Democratic electorate right now? Kayla, I'm going to start with you.
I think the common wisdom is that Democratic primary voters want a fighter and someone who will stand up to Republicans and show that they're not impotent and just, going to write an angrily worded letter and call it at that. I think Jasmine Crockett pretty easily fits into that, mold of what people seem to want. At the same time, I think we've heard Tallarico start rolling out some messaging to try to combat that characterization of her and this sort of automatic categorization of him as some like passive preacher peace hippie guy. And he's been saying like he has taken on Republicans as well, and he's also won. He's passed legislation despite being in the minority. So I don't know actually that it's such a like fighter versus not fighter choice, or at least that's what he's trying to make it not seem like one as much. But yeah, I don't know if he'll be able to change that perception of him as this, loving guy. And I also think it's maybe dangerous for him to try to take out the knives against Jasmine Crockett. He came out very quickly being like, we have to respect and love everyone in this race, and that includes Jasmine Crockett. I think if he walked back from that now, it would be kind of striking, and it also would be him attacking this like fairly well-liked person among Democratic primary voters.
Listeners of the podcast will have had in their feed a couple of weeks ago, while we were enjoying our holiday, my interview with Tallarico at the TribFest. And to me, what they did not see in that feed, and what to me is the most memorable part of that interview, was we did that interview in St. David's Church, which is a room of about like 350 people. And you walk to appear on stage, as you know, Eleanor, because you also did this. You walk up a stairwell into the aisle of the church, and you have to walk down the entire aisle, almost like you're getting married, to get up to the stage. And actually, Tallarico made that joke. But something that I have never experienced is walking into a room with someone that people are as excited to see as James Tallarico. As soon as like our heads kind of popped up, there was this like sort of like collective gasp and like cheer from the people in the room that was there. And I was like, wow, this is, I had to like,
for you.
I know. Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
I did like try to have, I was like, no, they're not doing this for you. Like contain your ego. But like that really stuck with me. And, to be completely honest, immediately after that was an interview with Colin Allred that I also did, and he did not generate that kind of reaction. And that really stuck with me. Allred obviously dropped out of the race, But there is that excitement around Tallarico. The thing is that, Jasmine Crockett didn't make it to TribFest due to what was going on in Congress at the time. Would she have generated that same reaction? Probably yes. And I have actually I make the joke about Tallarico being the grandma favorite, but like, another speaking engagement I had recently was with a group in Austin called Women Vote, and it was ahead of TribFest, and they were talking about the different people who were coming to TribFest, and it was a group of, it was, as J.D. Vance would call, the elderly hippies, right? The older, Democratic-leaning women. And the applause for Jasmine Crockett was just as palpable. And it is a pretty amazing sort of confluence of that Texas has two of these people and they are in the same race, which leads me to my next question. Will Democrats regret not spreading out that talent more? Is this bad for the Democrats to have both of them on the ballot for the same race when they're trying to make gains up and down the ballot?
I mean, Democrats started with 5 pretty big names that were maybe they wanted to form this slate to run in all these statewide offices to do exactly that and spread their talent. And now it's just the two of them. Like, they've kind of fallen off. I think Colin Allred dropping down to his congressional race obviously helps the party in terms of avoiding a runoff.
But then again, he's just going to a spot where there's, you're having another competitive primary.
He is also, right.
Yeah.
You're right.
It's not helping your statewide ticket. I mean, if
No.
I bet if we walked out on Congress Avenue right now and asked people to name a statewide candidate for any of the offices that are not named, Tallarico or Crockett, people would not be able to do that.
We should do that. Can we do that?
Yeah, let's take our mics.
TribCast on the road. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think that there was so much, talk early on, I think, about, or rumored talk, I guess, about, from these sort of luminaries of the Texas party about getting sort of a super ticket, getting, we really got to run this and we got to run seriously and we got to put real talent in each of these races. And obviously there are good candidates running in all of those races, but not the name recognition, cachet candidates. And I do wonder sometimes if those more, Beto O'Rourke, the Castros, these slightly longer tenured leaders of the party or leading candidates of the party, them deciding not to run, do they feel like it's not winnable? Do they feel like this is just thrown, they can do more as fundraisers or as sort of surrogates than they can do putting their own name on it?
Yeah, I do think, I think those two candidates and the other people who were interested in that race were particularly interested in it because of the possibility of running against Ken Paxton in the general election. On the other hand, I think a lot about Tallarico, a former teacher, education has been a big part of what he does. He made his name in the Texas legislature. Why is he not running for governor? And there's, 25 million reasons why he's not running for governor, and polls that would suggest that Abbott is a much, much, much more difficult candidate to face anyways. But what they're missing is really the candidate that's willing to sort of stick their neck out, and that could be something that they feel for sure. Next question number 6. What would a blue wave look like in 2026? I will preface this by noting the last time we had the quote unquote blue wave was again a competitive Senate race, 2018. Beto O'Rourke loses by less than 3 percentage points to Ted Cruz. But in the meantime, Democrats flip 12 seats in the Texas House and gain 2 seats in Congress. Doesn't seem very possible, Kayla, even if they get similar results at the top of the ballot this year.
They've only lost ground since 2018. Obviously, next year, they're hoping will resemble 2018 more. To take back the Texas House, they would have to win 14 seats, which just seems completely impossible and not going to happen. But I think they are hoping that, Ken Paxton will be the nominee and that will make a blue wave that translates to a statewide flip possible. Democrats are running in every single race that's on the ballot, every federal and state race, and they're hoping that means they can maximize their chances of flipping some seats and also send some energy up the ballot. But again, I think it'll I think there's still a lot of months until November, and I think it'll depend on the economy, and I think the economy first and foremost. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know that it'll be such a giant, wave.
And one of the main reasons for that, of course, is redistricting, right? 2018 happened at the end of a decade. I mean, I guess we're only 2 years earlier in the decade, but we, had a midterm redistricting in Congress, which means even if we have that kind of a result, it's more likely than not that Republicans will gain seats in Congress as opposed to Democrats. But in the Texas House, where things have been the most volatile in the past, I'm quoting yourself back to you, Kayla, but you recently wrote that the House Democratic Campaign Committee has identified 5 target seats, 4 that Democrats tried and failed to flip in 2024, and 1 seat that they lost during that time. 5 is a very small number, and you almost never hit all your target seats. So we could really be talking about, even if you see a Beto-like performance at the top, that not really changing the dynamic in the legislature much, if at all, which is just an interesting difference.
I think one data point that would help, like the argument that there is a blue wave when we do the after action analysis, whatever, is if Democrats can complicate the narratives about Latinos. Because I feel like last election showed Republicans have made great inroads, and that was happening for years. I mean, the GOP invested in South Texas, and also you saw that in some HDs in the Houston area. So it's not a surprise that the governor with $87 billion wants to focus on Harris County and keep making those inroads and get people out to vote, like low propensity voters. So I think that's going to be one of the key things to look out for.
The only thing I was gonna add on redistricting is I do wonder also about whether, redistricting has created a little bit more awareness around all of this, right? Like, I think obviously like that primarily affects congressional seats, but I think a lot of people don't like the idea that like, oh, like my vote has kind of been taken away from me. My vote feels like it doesn't matter as much. I don't get to like pick who I want. And like, does that mobilize some people? Trump is not at the top of the ticket. There are people who are pissed off about what Trump is doing. Does that motivate some Democrats to come out and vote? But is that enough to strategically shift things in the House? I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting question, and let's use it as a transition to the next one. I mean, Alejandro, you talked about some of the kind of trends that happened. This to me is like the question of Texas politics for the next like decade. As I said, the next 10 years is basically, was the 2024 election a blip or a sign of political reshuffling in Texas? And I'll set that up a little bit more, right? Which is that we have all gone through this cycle, right, many times where it's like, oh, do Democrats have a chance? And the answer has been no. But that has sort of belied the fact that the margins were shrinking, right? You had Trump winning by 16 points in 2016. You had Biden losing by, and now I'm going to get it all mixed up. But basically, you had a 16 margin, a 12 margin, a 9 margin. Like it was going down, and then in 2024, it went right back up to Trump winning by around 14. And beyond that, the reason that happened was some significant changes in some of the demographics that Democrats had identified. 18 to 29-year-olds, Trump swung plus 8% from 2020 to 2024, and essentially almost ran even there. Trump swung plus 6% among 30 to 44-year-olds. Young people moved dramatically to the right. Latinos, even more so, a 14% swing, where basically this is according to exit polls from those two races. Biden winning 58-41 among Latino voters in 2020, Trump winning 55-45 among Latinos 4 years later. Sorry, did I say Trump winning 55-45? Yeah, so it was a 14-point swing. Yeah,
we got it.
And then the question is, are those gains a reflection of a reorientation of Texas politics that would further entrench Republican dominance, or was there something special about 2024 that caused this, and we're going to go back to the trends we were already facing?
I think a mix of both. I mean, not to cop out.
Yeah.
But I think, I was interviewing someone for a story recently, and they described the Latino voter bloc as kind of like the power brokers who don't even know it yet, because the population has changed so much and it's going to keep changing. And that's why both parties are rightfully so paying so much attention. But you bring up young voters, and I think that is another like almost overlooked voter bloc, because Trump did make a lot of inroads across the country with young voters. And it's curious to see how people in Texas are focusing on them. You have the governor and lieutenant governor backing these turning point clubs at high schools. It's not voting yet age, but you get people animated and encouraged in the political process. You have Attorney General Ken Paxton stumping at turning point college chapters where people can vote. So I think both those are, I don't think it looks like the GOP is not taking that for granted, and that might kind of gets to an answer about maybe it was a realignment. But I also like scrutinize the hypothesis, and it's like, well, has the environment changed? Like back to how we started.
Right. Yeah. I mean, the polls would suggest that Trump is much less popular among Latino voters and young voters, for instance, than he was a year ago. Pew poll came out in November. 55% of Latino voters, this is nationwide, not just in Texas, strongly disapproving of the work he's doing as president. 70% overall disapproving when you factor in strongly and I guess less strongly. I mean, that's significant, and I think probably has, some people in Texas a little bit worried.
I think in a lot of ways, like that will be the story we are most watching coming out of the 2026 elections, is just like, does that persist? And I think what happens in Texas on that front will sort of be used as like a crystal ball on a lot of national politics going forward.
So that leads to another question. With redistricting, did Republicans overplay their hand in South Texas? Will they gain those seats that they, so proudly touted after the redistricting in last year?
Well, it doesn't help that President Trump pardoned Cuellar. I mean, I do think like those, like you said, like you were saying about the House seats, right? Like if you target 5, you don't always get 5, right? I think President Trump wanted 5 seats in Texas out of redistricting. I think the 2 that are, up for debate are those in the Valley. And I think, again, it's just going to be a real bellwether for like where both parties focus their energy in the coming years, with this weird caveat of Henry Cuellar, one of the most, moderate Democrats who had been running under this cloud of indictment, pardoned by President Trump, who pretty clearly, I think from a social media post, thought he would be switching to the Republican Party after that. He's, running against a Republican who previously was a Democrat and switched from the party. So it's just like a very politically nuanced place that I think I think both parties have struggled to like approach with like a statewide approach to be like, oh, they're ours. No, they're ours. It's like, they're themselves. The Valley belongs to itself. They're going to do what they're going to do. And everyone will spend the next 5 years like analyzing what it all meant. And it will just mean like the Valley is the Valley.
Yeah, I mean, the two candidates, Kayla, who are being targeted, Henry Cuellar, as already mentioned, Vicente Gonzalez, the other Democrat down there, both have a history of outperforming the top of the ticket.
Yeah, these are 2 uniquely durable Democrats that I think are very much tailored to their districts and well known in their districts. And so I think obviously Democrats see those 2 as their best chances of defending, those seats and making sure the Republicans don't get all 5 seats that they gerrymandered to get this summer. Did Republicans overplay their hand? I don't know, because at least in Texas, they seem poised to get at least those 3 additional seats.
Which is pretty unusual. I mean, you wouldn't expect to happen in a regular midterm election with the Republican Party in power, right? That's not the way the trend usually goes. Totally.
And I think maybe on the national level, you could say maybe it does seem like Republicans overplayed their hand in launching this redistricting war. I don't know the exact math at this point, but it seems like the gains that Trump had demanded are pretty much wiped out, if not eaten into by, reactive Democratic gerrymandering. But at least in Texas, it seems like they are going to get at least those 3 seats and, further solidify their dominance in our delegation.
So, question number 9: what will be the dominant issues when I'm trying to watch college basketball in February or college football in October? What are the topics that I'm going to be so tired of hearing about because of all the commercials and ads that are being bought by the candidates?
Like good governance, transparency, just meeting the people,
Ethics.
ethics, affordability.
I think in primaries, maybe like the usual suspects. I think immigration. Senator Cornyn's going down to the border this week. That comes to mind. The economy.
Yeah, I think affordability is just going to be the buzzword of 2026, and everyone's going to paint themselves as sort of a populist fighter for the working person and the middle class, and that to me feels like what we're going to hear a lot of.
Okay. And Trump, right? I mean, one of the reasons I asked this question, I guess, is just like, is anything going to be able to break through just the Trump focus, right? It feels to me like even when we're talking about attorney general, right? Like I'm getting the mailers now, MAGA, Mays, Middleton, right? Like even in races that you might not think have much to do with the president, they're talking about the president on both sides. Comptroller, right? Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think for Republicans, they want to like make it seem like Trump is at the top of the ticket as much as they can, especially in their primary. Democrats, I don't know. I feel like I've heard less, explicit anti-Trump messaging. Although maybe Jasmine Crockett is just like the anti-Trump fighter, but I don't know. I feel like I've heard a lot more focus on economic populism and that sort of thing.
It's interesting that you use the word affordability, which has of course been sort of become the buzzword for Democrats, nationally. How does that play out in Texas? I think is a really interesting question. I mean, Texas has traditionally been an affordable state. There's a lot of concern about like housing prices and things like that, possibly changing that to the extent that was a pretty high priority for Republicans this past session. They passed some significant bills there, some with the support of many with the support of Democrats. Property taxes obviously play a factor in there too. I wonder how much of a cudgel can affordability be for Democrats in Texas?
And I think also national and foreign affairs is going to affect how much candidates lean into or away from Trump. This morning I was listening to NPR and they had a report out of Houston about how if oil companies do get oil from Venezuela, it's going to be great for them, but not for the Texas economy. And then that affects their revenue. And that affects mainly one of the races, the person who collects that revenue. And then that affects the other races who he gives that revenue to.
Yeah.
I don't know. So that's going to also be interesting how these really massive, unprecedented, global actions trickle down to us.
Yeah.
I wonder if the finer point for Democrats here in Texas on affordability is healthcare, and if they are going to be trying to focus in on that more and to, again, put a finer point to the affordability argument. But
yeah, and then I'm also, to go back to the question of like, what are the commercials I'm going to have to be watching, while trying to just not think about work and enjoy sports. I mean, 2 years ago, 2024, it was social issues. It was, trans athletes and those types of things. It'll be curious to know whether that is still on people's minds 2 years later.
I think I was sort of saying this with like, so many things have been sort of addressed by President Trump in Texas and the state of Texas in a way that like closed a lot of doors to campaigning on it. One thing that has emerged in the last several months or has like reflamed is like pretty overt Islamophobia. I think is like a lot of candidates are really campaigning on that, and candidates who have like nothing to do, offices that obviously have very little to do with, people being Muslim, is getting a lot of airtime. And so I'm curious to see how much that like penetrates beyond like, oh, we're at an activist, debate into like we're creating ads about this. Like this is a top issue. I think that would be a real pivot.
Yeah, for sure. And also, I mean, again, going back to Trump, right? Like so many of these, I think, Republican primaries are going to be fighting over who actually represents the MAGA movement, who like can actually carry that mantle. Cornyn is doing this already in the Senate race, talking about how much she votes for him. Like, can he convince people get people to buy that? Because, there's his two opponents are going to be trying to push against that as much as they possibly can. And then I guess we'll see whether Trump endorses in this race or any others. It'll be fun to watch.
I think he loves the feeling of, they're all waiting for me to tell them who to vote for.
Exactly. Okay, last question. Let's play Nate Silver. What's the percentage chance of a Democrat actually winning a statewide race in Texas?
Any statewide race.
Any statewide race. If they win some random Supreme Court seat,
okay, yeah,
it counts.
All right, any statewide seat. And the scale starts at 0?
It's 0 to 100.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
Percent that they have a chance.
Percent chance. Yeah, like Nate Silver's.
I'll do 4.5%.
Wow.
Whoa.
I was going to say 5.
Wow.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Same brain.
Honestly, it's not computing in my head.
You
Like
want to say
how
0? You can
to-
say
Say
0
zero.
if you want.
I don't think it's 0. I think it's pretty low. I like it. It's just not computing in my head right now. I think if they were to win a statewide seat, it would be like by 0.5 of a point,
Yeah.
like half a
But
percent.
hey, a win is a win.
All right. Well, Kayla copped out. What
Yeah,
are you going to
100.
play?
Give us a real number.
I mean, I
100.
could give you like a 3. I don't know.
Okay, so no
All
one's
right.
going against 5.
No one's going over 5.
Yeah.
All
I mean, if you had asked me on Friday, what are the percent chance that, the U.S. would, armed forces
Sure,
would
right.
enter Venezuela
Crazy
and arrest,
things happen.
like there's a lot of interesting things that could completely shake things up. But I agree. It's a remote chance.
And I'll say, if we are wrong, we will have whoever wins on TribCast, and we will apologize
Apologize.
formally for doubting
Mhm.
their electoral acumen.
Yeah. Okay, great. Well, thank you all for this. It'll be a very exciting and interesting year, a very busy year for the three of you, but looking forward to it. Also, thanks to Rob and Chris for our excellent new theme music, which hopefully you will hear as we play you out. And we will talk to you next week.